Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Inquisitor. Today I have with me my big bro, my mentor, captain of industry, Ayotunde Coker, MD CEO of Open Access Data Centers. He'll be joining us today to cover a myriad of topics from technology, artificial intelligence, the role of data centers in that entire value chain, and the impact on the economy and on technology in Nigeria, in the world at large. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Nice intro.
Awesome. It's my boy in the industry. One of the first, there are very few people that I totally remember the first time I saw them, and you're one of those guys. Back in the day, I was with Microsoft. We came to Access Bank, and you came downstairs to welcome us, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm a tall guy myself. But I saw you and I was like, this man is tall, fresh. And it was a really good experience in terms of interacting with you, your grasp of the technology value proposition, the technology space, your leadership, visionary leadership, I must say. Really very intriguing in terms of this relationship over the past few years. And I'm really excited to have you on the show. Ayotunde Coker, who is this international man of technology mystery?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and it's great when you asked me if I'd join the Interaction Discussion podcast.
Yes.
Ayotunde Coker. Actually, you talked about Access Bank.
Yes.
It was Access Bank that got me back here. Actually, it was 2009 then.
Yes.
And as a group CIO, putting in place a lot of the foundations and transformation through technology of the bank and its scale that it's achieved today. I was there for 4 years. We went through there's really quite a bit of transformation then with respect to what we did moving the bank forward, and some first on ISO 27001, setting a different sort of bar in financial services industry. The PCI DSS, and so on. Really getting a great reputation of technology reliability.
Yes.
And we went through the process of taking over a bank, Intercontinental Bank.
At the time, yes.
Which was 5 times or so the size of the bank in record time.
Yes.
And that got an award from Financial Times in the UK.
Yeah.
And that started the scale of the bank across Africa.
I remember technology integration between Access and Intercontinental.
Oh gosh,
yes.
That was,
I remember the drama.
It was, quite an integration. And we pulled it off.
Absolutely.
A bit of indigestion in the process post-integration, but it's what you see, what you get, and the bank's really just done amazing things.
Cool.
Since I left about 4 years after being there, and then took a role with a company called Emerging Markets Payments, which provided processing for credit card technologies, Visa, MasterCard, and so on, and different payments technologies, growing that brand here in Nigeria and West Africa.
Yeah.
It's a good perspective of the scene across the entire financial services spectrum.
Yeah.
And then I took on the role Rack Center to run Rack Center and sort of build out that company, and became the household name. Anchored in Nigeria, but across Africa. Actually, it became a global data center and household name. So how did I get into data centers, right? When I was talking about joining Access Bank, I was in the UK at the time. And I said, one of the issues they have, we need to build a data center. And I said, why would you want to build a data center? Surely you co-locate. It's not the bank's core business. You need to grow the bank. You need your capital adequacy, put the capital where it matters, and so on. Build your earning assets and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, we'll see. Do you mean you want people to run away with our servers if we don't secure it ourselves? And I'd go on my time in the UK before I came back, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So I got here, and there was really no way you could co-locate the bank's assets or any standard that was acceptable. And so we set about building one, but we built it to the right standard It was built to uptime tier 3. That was the first in Africa actually
Tier 3
of doing a tier 3 data center, because you see it gives a baseline of quality and reliability and so on. We didn't certify it, but it was built to that standard.
Awesome.
And of course, coming in to manage infrastructure, I remember once when we had some blow up on some power thing somewhere, and putting in place the generating architecture that gives you very reliable power here is unique and quite a challenge. It's a whole process.
Absolutely.
Around diesel and so on.
Especially in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, yes. It's unique.
It's our unique challenges,
One of the things that actually was an eye-opener is the man in the street knows more about generators. They know what a 40 kVA can do.
Exactly.
I studied mechanical engineering, and here I was. I thought to myself, today you're a mechanical engineer. You've got to really take charge of this. And then realized we actually needed to put in place the right power architecture, unique to here.
Yes.
And processes to deliver reliable power. And that was that. Anyway, went through this stuff we talked about, the integration of the bank, the growth, taking technology to the point it did. And it was a couple of years in the payments industry. But Jagal, one of the conglomerates in Nigeria, in sort of infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure and energy infrastructure space, decided to invest in the data center. But I initially, because they said, well, this guy has done, the data center infrastructure stuff here, right? Speak to him. And initially it was a non-executive relationship advising, do this and stuff like that.
That's how they usually bring you in.
Yes, and then at that point, I thought, okay, job done with the payments industry, with the momentum scale we've established, and I joined Rack Center, and then I guess it's the history beyond that.
Exactly.
And you first to be certified as uptime in Africa, the first to achieve certain milestones, and then sort of outside of South Africa and so on. We set a bar, and that's been sort of an Africa-wide sort of bar in that industry.
Absolutely, still is.
I was there for 8 years, and I joined Open Access Data Centers 2.5 years ago as CEO for the OADC group. We built data centers across Africa. OADC is part of WIOC, WIOCC, which then was the West Indian Ocean Cable Company.
One of our key partners here.
Exactly, yes. And actually, even with my time at Rack Center, we with Inc. had a good partnership also with WIOC, and so on. And with that Africa expansion intent, I felt it was the right time to join to bring about that Pan-Africa expansion. I'm passionate about Africa. My role at Access Bank, based here in Lagos, but it's an Africa view. I've always based in Lagos with my roles across Africa.
Awesome.
And we've set about building the data center company. WIOC actually set up OADC about 5 years ago, but the build out really was from around about 2.5 years ago, around about sort of when I joined. We have this core to edge strategy. So we have the core data centers are the big megawatts ones. They started with 1 megawatt, but trajectory to 10 and so on. And then we have the edge data centers that are located at real points of concentration, taking data to the edge point of use, point of consumption, takes out latency, and so on. And also, you don't have to be at one end of the country where your assets at another end, because it's a core data center there. You can optimize.
Awesome.
So in South Africa, WIOC, the connectivity company, provides open access wholesale connectivity. And OADC is a carrier neutral open access data center. So in addition to that, we also saw the opportunity of having this converged open digital infrastructure proposition. That means that we optimize between open connectivity and carrier neutral data centers. And I know you've seen some of that synergy.
Yes. I had a tour of your facility. Amazing stuff. And I think the real game changer for you guys is you're not just playing at one level of the value chain. So the connectivity side is there, and then the carrier neutral data center side is there. But you mentioned something, jokingly in your previous statement, and that you've already answered some of it, but I still want to have you emphasize for the sake of the viewers. When the banker said, you know, you want us to do a data center, you want them to run away with our servers or our racks or whatever. For a lot of people do not really understand the value proposition of a data center. And not just the guys on the streets, even business owners who traditionally should have that vision don't really understand the value proposition of not just a data center in one location or one country, but the whole cross connect. And luckily we have you here. Your experience has always been, you know, you're in Nigeria, but Pan-African in terms of coverage. What is the value proposition of the data center, and what role does a carrier neutral data center like yours play in terms of fulfilling that role? Let's understand the position of the data center in the value chain and the value, so investors can understand, consumers can understand, you know, everyday tech bros and enthusiasts can understand as well.
Okay, so you talked about the Pan-Africa, and just to touch on that, we have what this core data centers, 4 of them in South Africa, 1 in Durban, and with Wire Connectivity Company, it's a consortium partner with Google, the Equiano subsea cable on the west coast, and also with 2Africa, Meta and 2Africa cable, got fiber pairs on that around the west coast of Africa and the east-facing coast of Africa. In Durban, the 2Africa cable lands into our mega facility over there. That's building out about 8 to 10 megawatts.
Wow.
Great momentum right now. And we have one in Johannesburg, which is in Sando. That's another scale data center, building out very nicely. And 2 in Cape Town. Okay, Rondebosch and Brackenfell. And then the real flagship is the one you mentioned in Lagos. The Equiano cable lands into it. And it's expanding, you know, quite quickly. 2 megawatts critical IT load now. Building out, we're expanding it very rapidly now to 24 megawatts.
Awesome.
It's a hyperscale footprint. And in every location we build the interconnect carrier neutral ecosystem. Open access to all of the internet exchanges, you know, so on. To add to that, last year the Lagos one went live 2023, early 2023, so it's a couple of years live now. In Kinshasa, we built a core data center there. It's the first data center in Kinshasa. Every one of our data centers are built to tier 3 standard certified, you know, so on. So the Kinshasa one went live. It's transformed the digital ecosystem over there. It's the first one. Now corporates have somewhere to collocate at. We've brought in a level of quality right now, and it's just landed as being a credible ecosystem of interconnecting. Kinshasa is vibrant, it's a bit like Lagos actually, about 16 million population, and so that was quite unique. It's delightful to see how you can transform the digital ecosystem. So you said, where do data centers fit in all of this?
Between the subsea, the last mile, and all that.
So why would you what is it and why would you collocate? You see, before I got back here, my roles in the UK, my last couple of roles where I was the Chief Technology Officer for Criminal Justice in the UK. Making sure you had streamlined criminal justice value chain across police, Crown Prosecution Service, prisons, courts, so on. And actually, at the time, we pioneered with also virtual courts. This was about 20 years ago now, almost.
When was the new
thing? Before, which means you could hold court sessions virtually. The judge, the police, and cameras and so on.
It was a big thing back in the day.
It was. And the other thing I advocated for was not building our own data centers. I was the chair of Her Majesty's Architecture Board, where we look at critical large-scale technology investments. So the guidance was, don't build data centers. We had very high-quality, secure, scale outsourcing partners. And that, after a few years, became what they call the Crown data centers, but by then. So I would say, why put capital in this? Go on, let's build schools, let's build hospitals, let's build roads. Let the people who do co-location do it.
Do their thing.
I then moved on to take a role before that role, actually, I had been the global applications director for functions and BP, the global oil major.
Yeah.
And wasn't my remit, but the infrastructure lead we'd moved from 450 data centers globally to 3 mega data centers, outsourced, co-located in Chicago, I think in London, and in Singapore, right? Okay. So for me, building a data center wasn't something I would embark on.
Yeah.
But then I had to, because there was no choice. I didn't want to, but we had to.
Yeah.
Maintaining and supporting it means you need specialist skills. It's not just a building.
Of course.
You need specialist skills, operations, entire value chain.
Security.
And I remember my wife jokingly saying to me that you're director of diesel, you're director of, really, you just have to pay so much attention to managing all of those things.
Yes.
So a co-location data center, you see, you build it to a very high quality as a co-location facility. You ensure the levels of physical security that are required.
Yes.
As what a carrier neutral facility means, you're not aligned to any particular carrier.
Yeah.
And the relationship with buyers is very important because it's an open access carrier.
Yes.
So it means that your clients in the facility have access to pretty much all of the connectivity they need to. So a bank goes into a co-location environment, it's highly secure.
Yeah.
You get 5, 10, 15 levels of physical security.
Yeah.
You have access immediately to something that is, say, ISO 27000 certified.
Awesome.
If you have elasticity in your ability to scale, you might go in with a few racks into the data center and decide you want to grow. It's a phone call to say, I'd like X more rack space, please. And imagine if you build your own data center. It's a distraction.
A big one.
It's a big distraction. And you have a lot of capital tied up in a non-earning asset.
Yep.
And you know what that does to balance sheets?
It blows it up.
Yeah, investors look at it, and these days, actually, investors look at you and thinking, so why are you deploying expensive capital on a data center? Well, we now know there's a whole world of co-location out there, and they're looking at your balance sheet thinking this doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
You speak to some CEOs that don't co-locate, and you think, well, of course your investors are giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
This day and age, it's 16 years since I was, built data center. It's moved on now because we have lots of co-location facilities here, South Africa, and other places in Africa. So one example, you then want to grow as a company. So you talk to your CIO, they come up with a build expansion plan for bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
You've got to then go and do all of this procurement. There's a lot of capital you have to put in, while you're probably trying to secure capital to expand the front end of your company. They come up with a 6-month expansion plan. And these projects, they don't always come in on time. It could be 8 months, delays. 10 months. In that time, all your competitors that are co-located, they've moved on. They've added the technology, and now you have multi-infrastructure environment, cloud, co-located, and so on. They've just innovated and moved on. You're still building brick and mortar, knocking walls down. It's just a way to. I sometimes actually say that that's an indication of businesses that are going towards failure. Why? If you make decisions like that on how you deploy your capital, and how you hamper the growth elasticity of your business. Because businesses, some areas you need to grow rapidly, but you might need to shrink other areas to bring growth elsewhere because things change. You now have changed environments like AI, you've got managed services, you've got blockchain, you've got all of those things. What was the norm, you might need to shrink, but to expand in other areas.
Absolutely.
You've got that business elasticity.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say it's usually an indication of slow. It'd be like cholesterol, you just slow death.
The business.
Yeah, because you're then taking that decision making into other areas.
Absolutely.
Are you asking investors for capital to grow, and they're thinking you're putting all that capital in? So the world has changed, and that's why it's actually significantly better to co-locate. You don't think about power. All you think about is you have the aggregated efficiency of power systems.
Yep.
You don't think about cooling. Somebody else thinks about it.
Yeah.
Those are just very, very complicated technical issues that you leave to the experts.
Yep.
Because they do that day to day. And for the data center company, the building and the bricks and mortar and all of that mechanical and electrical are earning assets.
Exactly.
That's what's changed about the world, and that's why I would say don't co-locate. Now, what role does a data center play in digital infrastructure?
Yep.
Well, typically if the data center that you're in goes down for whatever reason, usually power or processes, people.
Yep.
Right?
That happens.
It's 70% is actually people.
Yep.
Right? You have mechanical issues. They respond to it. They're trained to understand what needs to be done to keep 100% uptime.
Yep.
Right? If that facility goes down, everything goes down. Your networks go down because the network providers are in the data center.
Very costly.
So exactly, very costly. The consequences can be really quite far-reaching.
Yep.
Okay. So data centers actually underpin digital infrastructure.
Bam.
Interconnectivity is the next level. You need to have interconnectivity. And therefore, once the data center operates, you have broad interconnectivity in a neutral environment. That is another key aspect of the data center. So there's a third part which underpins the energy and sustainable energy, and all that's now become really key. So you have this interplay between the data center, the connectivity, and energy.
Yeah.
So finally on that, in terms of the value, right, that you bring, one of the things we're doing across Africa, we intend to expand our data center capability across Africa. WIOC, the connectivity company, is building the national long distance networks in Nigeria right now. We're also putting in place open access fiber to FTTX, fiber to the business, fiber to the home, and so on. To transform the ISP interconnectivity, internet access activity in the country, including access to fiber. Same thing that was done by the company in South Africa, a project coming here, growing into building national long distance networks in South Africa, Southern Africa fiber networks, and so on. If you pull that together with what we're doing with our data centers, we are transforming lives and livelihoods in Africa.
Yep.
We add significantly to economies that we operate in Africa. Why? We all know that thing that if you get 10% broadband penetration and meaningful broadband, and you also actually drive the adoption. Yes. Penetration is one thing.
Adoption is another.
Adoption is another. Get the adoption. You can get in emerging economies like Africa, of different stages, right? But let's say 2% on average. But you can actually get 2.5%. Typically, globally, is about 1.5% growth in GDP.
Wow.
Okay. You have access to, you now have devices that are used to enable broadband access. Of course, power is key in many areas. You can impact education, you can impact health, you can impact general activity of efficiency, security, commerce, new commerce models turn up.
Exactly.
People are able to run businesses on apps that never know, and you can have people in small, medium enterprise, micro enterprises running their businesses on a smartphone. 2015, I think it was when The Economist did analysis that in Africa, smartphone sales had exceeded sales of feature phones, right? And that would have been continuing over the last 10 years or so. Okay, come to data centers. As you build out data centers, research has shown Typically, it costs about $10 million to build a megawatt of a core data centers. We do it more efficiently than that. Some do it less. I think in the maturity cycle, the supply chains tend to be more, say about 15 million to a megawatt. As it matures, you can get down to 8, 7, depending on how a variety of. But let's say 10 million. So a nice round figure, right? Yeah, nice round figure. So, if you build a data center, carry neutral as part of this ecosystem, actually, for every $10 you spend, could be a $50 impact on the economy. Economic ecosystem where you are.
Awesome.
Why? Either direct impact, because you're paying architects to design it, you've got engineers, highly skilled, high earning engineers doing the mechanical and electrical. You bring the construction companies in, the piling, this, that, and the other. You build it and fit out, and you employ people.
It's a catalyst.
Exactly. Imagine the industries you're impacting.
The ripple effect.
Then the induced effect is beyond that.
Absolutely.
Because they then go out into society to spend.
Multiplier effect.
Exactly. The multiplier effect is significant because you're employing very highly skilled people, highly educated professionals, or other value chains of blue-collar workers, artisans, and so on.
All of that.
And then, of course, when you operate the data center, you now have your sort of power value chain. You either self-built or from utility. You raise the demand in the utility. They employ more people. And so 50, times that amount is not out of reach.
Amazing.
So you spend, you build a 10 megawatt data center for say $100 million. That's $5 billion you could add to the, it's dollars, you can have your local currencies around the place, the real impact is the equivalent
in dollars at the end of the day.
And then overlay that on the fact that with connectivity, you're driving growth in GDP activity to 2.5% growth in GDP. So that's why I say we go around Africa with our converged open digital infrastructure value proposition, which transforms economies. And the impact we've had and are having, for instance, even Lagos environment, because it's a significant scale of facility we've already put in place. The Aquino cable lines into the facility we're at. We're building out significantly. It's changed the game, is what people say when they come to see the facility. I'm always sort of proud of what my colleagues have done.
We said the same thing when we came by.
There you go.
Game changer.
It's a game changer. It just sets a new bar in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's how in answer to your question, the data centers, the impact it has, economic impact, and impact it has on
technology
businesses,
penetration.
Technology. And we're now getting to a level where we're looking at AI-ready data centers that can take the complexities and densities of AI
requirements.
That's coming very, very rapidly.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that clarification. Allow me now to put you on the spot a little bit. Some of the key players in terms of the proliferation of this value to the rest of the economy are your customers, whether they're banks, whether they're FMCG, oil and gas. They come to co-locate within your facilities. In my job as a sales director, I often talk to other CIOs, other MDs, other CFOs. And one of the things that is recurring is, I didn't know this thing was going to be so costly going forward when I came in. So the perspective seems to be that, we come in, it seems cost effective, the balance sheet reduces, everything turns to OPEX, we're good initially, but subscription keeps increasing. It's $500 million today, we're okay, then it goes to $1 million. In 4 years time, we're paying $2 million. In 6 years time, it has grown, and our workloads and our demands keep increasing. And while we were meant to believe that it was supposed to be more flexible access to compute power, it turns out it's more often than not going in the direction of increments than the opposite direction, where we're deactivating workloads we don't need anymore. So it becomes a place where it's sort of a grip that the infrastructure provider has, whereas the client seems to be needing to pay more and more and more and more, and it's beginning to become hard to manage after some years.
The data centers are very sticky business, and they have to be strategic relationships. Right, and it always actually turns out cheaper, more elastic, effective than building your own, as I've described.
Absolutely.
Okay. However, if you increase the power you consume, if you increase the scale of your infrastructure, you're taking up more space, more power, the prices will change. Okay. Now, what tends to happen is where you have situations of changing macroeconomic situations, input costs, and so on. From time to time, that can be reflected in, so reflecting that. It's always more efficient to aggregate your demands across multiple providers. Where there's, say, might be a change in fuel prices, that change is actually not directly fully onto you, but tends to be aggregated across a whole range of clients you have. But it does happen. Okay, so the key thing is to make sure that your infrastructure is optimized. As you grow, you make sure you rationalize some of the things you don't need, get more efficient compute, because you see, people think, we're going to plaster the whole world with data centers. No, but compute has to become more efficient. Okay, and you can fit in more with higher density. So you always have to make sure you drive the rationalization of your infrastructure, bring in new converged infrastructure, hit a lot more bang with your bucks.
Exactly.
Right? But if you don't, the cost will just continue to go up and up and up and up. And if you consume power you shouldn't be consuming, you pay for it. So in a way, there's also the need to make sure you're continuously efficient. When I talked about this elasticity, when I talked about the whole thing around aggregating infrastructure demands, when I talk about the whole range of these things, it's efficient. It's much more efficient than building your own. That's why it's counterintuitive for me when I'm a CIO to want to go out and build my own. I really didn't want to do it. I always take that stand because I also had track record before that of co-locating in all my career in the UK.
And coming back.
Before coming back.
So if I'll paraphrase you, is yes, you get the initial advantages of co-locating, but then you have to watch your appetite and be very, vigilant in terms of how you optimize your own operation, so you just don't keep.
I'll build on your analogy. It's one thing watching your appetite, but if to grow, you need to eat more. You just need to make sure that your diet is the right diet.
Exactly. So they should check their P&L when they're doing these things.
You see, one thing around cloud, you see, there's a combination now about going to cloud, public cloud or private cloud. Some people say this about cloud. We've gone into cloud. We started with this pricing, we've grown and so on, and we now hit this threshold and the pricing is significantly higher, so on. And well, you're growing. It's a good thing. You need more compute. It's a good thing. With more compute, your numbers go up. But then people say, okay, perhaps I now really want to optimize that with what is mine, with co-located services. It's very unlikely that people will go from good quality, effective, well client managed co-location to build their own. Very rare.
Almost impossible.
It's possible, but you then have to build and all of that and stuff like that. You go through the whole cycle of what was the reason you decided to avoid
in the first place.
Yes. So enterprises and and so on always have to strike that balance and get the right diet. I'll use just an analogy again of the mix of things you choose to eat. Co-location on one side, public cloud on the other, private cloud on the other as well, and just get the right optimized mix. And usually the data center sits around that because you have the interconnectivity in the ecosystem you're in. You can plug into all of these. One of the things that we're bringing, we announced Open Access Fabric, is also extending the capability to access global cloud platforms, leveraging the mix of interconnectivity that we have. So it helps individuals, SMEs, MSMEs find the right balance of how they deal with their infrastructure, either locally or globally. Which is, we do so global, local. We have multinationals who are located here, for instance, and we're able to help them connect into their entire global multinational fabric of the parent company.
Awesome.
So it's actually very efficient in terms of, optimizing that. In fact, we can have global conversations to say, since we're partners in your global infrastructure and we're able to give you that flexibility, how do we optimize it?
Awesome.
Whether it's from Nigeria to South Africa, Nigeria to Europe, or whatever, we can have that discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time. But to close, I'll have just one more question. We talked about, where we're coming from, where we're at today, the value proposition in terms of the future. There's been some, I wouldn't exactly call it seismic, but there's been significant changes happening. There's an influx of new players. There's an influx of, subsea capacity coming into Africa and Nigeria. And I think more recently, there's been sort of a paradigm shift in terms of our estimation of how much compute power we're going to need in the future to deliver workloads like AI, with the advent of DeepSeek, for example, completely shattered that paradigm of what we're expecting to be such a high demand. It looks like it's not going to be that much. Microsoft just also recently announced very efficient chip on computing that will revolutionize what we have done with what we're doing with computing. How does that affect the outlook for technology, for data centers going forward, all the investments that have been made in terms of how to expand this footprint? Will it be as needed, or will the demand automatically fill that space?
Well, I think these are all good things, because there was a time about 5-10 years ago that I talked about graphene. You'd be able to do so much more, and some of that is filtering, but the demand, the growth in data demand and the possibilities are kind of becoming exponential. Are we going to plaster the world with data centers? So when we get these efficiencies, it's good, because it means therefore that the demand will continue to grow. We're seeing higher densities. Better efficiencies are good for being able to deliver a lot more with a lot less, but the lot more is significantly more that the underpinning infrastructure has to grow anyway. So I don't think we're going to see this sort of reduction, but the good thing is that we won't see what is being a concern in a way in terms of the exponential, or in terms of demand for power. In Europe, there has been issues with respect to the scale of growth of data centers, and now there's been a shift thinking, we need to do something to make sure we have the power available. But many places run out of power. So I then felt that there was this opportunity for the anchor points, co-location points in Africa, which Lagos is becoming a significant hub outside of South Africa. We've got about 70 megawatts of data center capacity in coming live and hyperscale capacity in final design to build or in initial design that's been announced. At least 70 megawatts, right? So came up with this view that there will be capacity substitution happening. As the data centers become live, you talked about the proliferation of undersea, subsea cable capacity that's coming in. If you look at Equiano, I think the total capacity we have now is around about 30 terabits or something. When you look at wax, ACE, so on. just Equiano's coming with about 120, 130
Yes, about 3 times what is on ground.
Exactly
already.
right now.
Yes.
And now we've got 2 Africa coming, that's about 180.
80.
Okay.
So where will all those go?
Exactly. What we build out, and 90,000 kilometers of fiber infrastructure has been announced.
Yep. By the
minister. Exactly. So this builds a build out.
Yep.
Okay. And as you build those, bring those in, it then means that it's not just local consumption. How do you substitute the capacity of what is Africa's compute that's sitting in Europe now?
Yes.
You suddenly think, oh, send it back to Africa. It's capacity substitution.
Yeah.
Make more capacity available in Europe. So that brings some growth apart from the local growth that we'll see here that we haven't really exploited.
Yes.
Because we had good high quality data centers. We now have the advent of the hyperscale data centers coming here.
Yep.
They've been building out for the last 8 years or so.
Yep.
In South Africa. Nigeria is picking up that wave right now.
Egypt as well.
Egypt is building out its own, scaling. Nairobi is coming up, IX Africa in there with the hyperscale data centers, right? And so now you're right, we have new entrants into the market. Yeah. That's fine. I mean, it increases competition, but the demand scale, I do a lot with making sure I try to raise the boat, raise the tide for, and that raises,
more traffic, exactly. More for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Because we need it.
Yeah.
And it's transformational, as I mentioned
for the
before,
economy
in terms of economic
impact.
Yeah. So you also have smaller data centers across different countries in Africa, and you will also see an increasing shift, not from a country-based data protection, sovereign data rule,
regulatory.
We'll now have, just like you have with GDPR across Europe, we will now have an Africa DPR kind of framework that allows us to optimize capacity across Africa. Awesome. You still have the big hubs like Lagos, Nairobi,
South Africa.
But it means that we can now diversify the investments into where we have good, strong ease of doing business for infrastructure. It encourages governments to attract data center and connectivity investment companies to come in to put data centers there, because now the scale of the data center does not depend on the scale of the size of the country. It depends on the availability to power, to green energy, to connectivity, and that's bound to grow other smaller economies. The big ones, hubs, will still be there.
Yeah.
But it means you can now distribute data center scale into more locations across Africa. Yeah. And that's good for Africa.
Awesome. I knew I said that was the last question, but you touched on something that I just have to close with this. Last absolute question is regarding sustainable energy and the green footprint. Mm-hmm. What is OEDC's agenda on that ESG side of things?
Oh gosh, yes. That is in our operating fabric.
Okay.
We don't pay lip service to it. We have at director level somebody who is driving our ESG agenda.
Yeah.
Something we are passionate about in the country. We have an 8-plank strategy around what we look at with respect to technology strategy, culture. We're looking at in terms of operations. Yeah. We're looking at our supply chain. We look at advocacy and so on. So we look right, and we don't have a team of people doing ESG stuff.
Okay.
No, we enroll everybody in the company as part of the culture. So everybody is operating within the context of what we do in ESG.
Amazing stuff.
That is a core plank of our approach to our strategy.
Awesome.
We also then look at technology, which is one of the core planks of our framework, right? Yeah. Where are we best located to put our data centers? Or we've made investments. How can we optimize them for efficiency?
Yeah.
So that you need less power to achieve the same cooling outcomes.
Yeah.
It's something that we focus on highly. We recently launched a 330 kilowatt it'd be nice if it was a megawatt, kilowatts solar sort of capacity, which has gone live at our Durban facility as a template for what we'll do. We one is gas in itself is sort of not carbon or a sort of cleaner energy, but you will find across Africa, in Kinshasa, our power source is entirely hydro. For instance, it's the different solutions for different locations, but the overriding strategy and intent is that everything we do has an intent of sustainability agenda. If you look at our supply chain, we also apply that, scope 1, scope 2 views on sustainability in terms of what we do in the entire sort of sustainability agenda that we put in place. And also recently, a few months ago, last year, we announced that sustainability linked loans. So we get benefits out of meeting some pretty tough criteria in terms of the pricing. I don't think we've had many examples of those SLLs, like they call them, right here. But if we pioneer in that aspect, then we're quite delighted that we're able to do that.
Please share details. I'm sure those of us at Inc. will be happy to collaborate with you in this regard and help you achieve.
Just raises our collaboration to a different level.
Exactly. So thank you so much for the time. It was very exciting for me. I hope it's exciting for our listeners as well. It's always good to have you.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Looking forward to talking some more, doing more business, and sort of continue to set the pace.
More business sounds good.
Yes. And continue to set the pace in terms of the technology industry in Nigeria and Africa. Thank you so much, Sule. So this has been another very exciting edition of The Inquisitor. I was very happy, very elated to be talking to my big bro in the industry, Ayotunde Coker of OADC. And stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this edition. We'll be here again in a couple of days to have another exciting guest and cover exciting topics around technology in Nigeria, in Africa, and indeed the world. See you next time.